Where do you see yourself in 5 years? We've dealt with this one before here at Deutsche Bank, forever and ever and ever. Let's go. Let's talk about how to pass Deutsche Bank's telephone or video interview. What's up guys, it's Mike from Job Read English here with another video in the Pass the Interview video series where we break down the interview processes of world famous companies. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel down below, click like on the video and drop us a comment. Let us know how we're doing and what company that you would like us to research and cover next. Today, we're going to be talking about Deutsche Bank. We're excited to bring this one to you. It's been a little bit of time in the making. We always want to make sure that our research is on point for you. And also we're going to be covering quite a few questions today. 15 questions in all for what you can expect from Deutsche Bank's first round interview. So let's start off with 4 fast facts about Deutsche Bank. Number 1, Deutsche Bank was founded in 1870 and is one of Europe's oldest banks and is currently Germany's leading bank and one of the biggest banks in the world. Fact number 2, one of the 3 founders of Deutsche Bank was George Siemens, whose father's cousin was the founder of the electronics conglomerate Siemens. Fact number 3, Deutsche Bank came about because previously German importers and exporters were having to use French and British banks to clear Deutschmarks against francs and pounds, which put them at a serious disadvantage when it came to the currency exchange. So the 3 founders of Deutsche Bank got together so that they would be able to clear currency within Germany. Fact number 4, now Deutsche Bank probably isn't alone in this, but we did find this a really fascinating figure. At any one point in time, currently Deutsche Bank is on the receiving end of over 7,000 litigation cases and has up to 7 billion euros set aside to deal with any damages that may occur from these cases. That's quite a pot. Okay, let's talk about interview format. Now you may have noticed in my introduction I said Deutsche Bank's video or telephone interview. Now some banks, Deutsche Bank kind of reminds me of Morgan Stanley in this sense. They will actually do 2 interviews. One will be competency based and one will be technical. The reason being is you will actually get interviewed in the second interview by somebody who's working in the department that you're going to work. Say for example you're applying for equity capital markets, you might do the first interview with just a member of the HR team or even an outsourced recruiter, but the second interview is going to be somebody who is going to be more senior than you in equity capital markets or potentially even the director of the division. So that's something to be aware of. Also, we have seen that there is a changeability. Sometimes you'll do it by video, but if you just need to fit into someone else's schedule, the chances are they're just going to call you on the phone. They're going to get somebody else to arrange it so that they can go through the questions with you. So we want to put that out there just so you're aware. Each interview should last about 30 minutes. If you're wondering about timings, I'd say 2 to 3 minutes per question. Obviously, if somebody's on the other end of a phone, you don't get 30 seconds to think of your answer. They might give you 5 seconds and they'll go like, hello, can you hear me? Have you lost your signal? So you're not going to get 8 at a time. The one good thing about a phone interview is at least no one can see where you're looking. So if you've got some notes or little cards on the table just as prompts, then that's quite useful for that. So each of them has their own benefits, but of course the one nice thing about a video interview is that you're basically speaking to a camera, so you don't have to worry about someone interjecting, interrupting, asking you follow-up questions, hurrying you up, being in a bad mood. You just kind of do whatever the timer tells you to do. So in terms of the number of questions you can expect, I tend to say ballpark for a 30-minute interview, 7 to 10 questions. 10 questions is really quite a lot. You might think that's not so much time, but really 3 minutes, one stacked on top of the other, that's quite a fast pace. Bearing in mind, unless the interviewer is really somebody from HR or outsourced and they're just reading from a script, they're probably going to want to have some element of dynamism with you. By that I mean they're going to want to have a conversation. They're not going to say, tell me about the time You know, they might do that, but it's kind of boring for them as well. They're going to sort of go, oh, you know, what does that mean? Or tell me a little bit more about this. So there is going to be that element of dynamism. Also, another thing to bear in mind is for these longer interviews, you definitely want to practice a long interview. So I've done many mocks with clients, and what I tend to find is on a single question, 2 questions, 3 questions, they're fine, really hot. But you ask them 10 questions in a row and they start to fade because it's really quite hard work being bombarded with questions for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, even just for 20 minutes. It is all about building the stamina. So as soon as you feel like you're kind of okay with the answers, try and build some stamina, maybe once a week, just sort of do a longer interview, just be doing like for 30 minutes or for 20 minutes, just answering question after question after question. Believe me, it will give you a headache, but it will build some really good stamina for when you're being faced with the real thing. What I tended to find was the candidates they failed later on in the interview, not because there was anything wrong with them, but just because they kind of ran out of stamina. You know, imagine a boxer who just doesn't have the lungs, doesn't have, you know, and kind of gasses out. You have like 5 rounds of 2 minutes. They come out and they're really hot. They're really, you know, they're really going for it the first 2 rounds. Then the 3rd round, they're just dead in the water. They drop their hands, they get knocked out. It doesn't mean that they're a bad fighter. They just didn't have the stamina. So something for you to think about. So let's talk about Deutsche Bank's questions. We picked out quite a few for you today. It's a big bank. There's a lot of interest in Deutsche Bank and what they do, and I know from messages that we've received. So we wanted to go a little bit deeper with this one, kind of like we did a little bit with Morgan Stanley. We're going to sort of gloss over some of the more regular questions that we answer. Always remember, we probably have a video about it, which will pop up where we'll go through this in more detail. Those of you who are regulars to the channel will know that. You know, there are certain questions which come up time and time again. Let's go. Question 1, why Deutsche Bank? You're always going to get asked this. There'll be a link to a video up above that talks about why this company, 3 to 5 key facts that you couldn't name for anybody else. Why this role? Again, there's going to be another video that's going to pop up here where you can go and watch this, have a longer form video and download a sheet so that you can fill in the answer yourself. So why this role? 2 parts. First part, what would you do? What are the skills that you could be expected to do? What would you do day to day? The second part is, what is the experience that you bring in terms of the skills that you have that make you great for this job? Cool. Number 3, what could you bring to this role? This is a great question. This is a little bit more about your personality, not just to your skills as well, but it could be your hunger to learn, your motivation, your curiosity, your sense of inquisitiveness, and so on and so forth, right? So this is something to really think about, not just from a skills point of view, but from a personal motivation and energy point of view, in terms of whether that be hard skills like coding, like knowledge around specific technical indicators, financial markets, but also just about soft skills. You know, I'm gregarious, I'm highly motivated, I'm this and that. But what you really want to think about is, don't just make it generic. So for that person out there, it's going to be like, I'm a really good communicator. Come on, I'm really good at teamwork. Oh wow, I've never heard that before. Try and think about something that's different, in the sense that the story that you tell and the context that you give it is going to make it different for you. So you could say, I'm a really good communicator because I helped to run a charity group of 40 people. Cool, proof in the story. Question 4, describe a time when you had to influence key stakeholders. Now I felt this was a bit of a different question, a little bit more difficult. You might think, what do you mean key stakeholders? This one's actually quite easy when you break it down. Could just be your professor, could be your teacher, could be your parents, could be your boss at work. They're a key stakeholder. They're basically somebody who has the power to make a decision which is going to materially affect what you do and do not do in the future. And this is a really easy one you can do, say putting together a good piece of work, a project, overcoming a problem, whatever that may be, in order to answer this question. Question 5, tell me about yourself. Classic. So again, there's going to be a link to this video up above talking about tell me about yourself, the 6 parts that are needed, and also a handout that you can click and download and fill out yourself, which is super useful just a quick rundown. So you want to say, I kind of like to do this like a little timeline. So it's like the present, the past, and the future. What are you doing right now? What have you done in the last 3 to 5 years? And what do you want to do in the future? Then you go through work experience, extracurricular activity, volunteering, whatever that may be, skills and interests and hobbies. And the 6th part is, end with a bang, something that's really interesting, unique to you. It's a talking point. Sometimes when someone says something like, I really like to crochet teddy bears, and it's like, can you tell me some more about that? Do you have some photos? Or I recently went to the North Pole. When someone says something, and unless you're just really into yourself or just not a very good listener, you're likely to go, tell me more, show me something. That's a good thing to do, particularly for a telephone interview. Question 6, tell me about a time that you failed. I love negative questions. I think a lot of times people struggle with these because they think, well, sometimes I get a textbook response like, oh, well, I've never really failed at anything. I'm like, ugh! I was like, dude, come on. Like, seriously, there's no one here. Why are you being like this? It could be an exam that you failed. It could be a project that you didn't get a high enough mark for. It could be, a sporting achievement, whatever it is. We've all failed at something because we've had a set of expectations. We have failed to meet those expectations, right? So what's important here is obviously the event itself, but very often what get missed is someone will say, oh, I failed at this thing, end. And it's just like, and then, so what you want to think about this is, I failed at this thing. So say, for example, you failed an exam at university. I failed an exam at university, but then that's really no surprise to anybody that knows me. So I failed an exam because I was lazy, or I was stressed, or whatever be the story, right? Whatever is the context. Cool. Then what happened to make you learn from this failure to get better? I studied harder, I started early, I was more organized, I had better time management skill, whatever that may be, and that's how you kind of turn that failure into a success. Question 7, name a challenge that you overcame. This is a great one for international students. I always just say coming to another country and studying in a language that isn't native to you, because I feel like that's a great challenge to overcome. Whatever it may be, whether this be a personal issue, a mental health issue, an academic issue, whatever it is, I would probably say don't get too deep about this. Sometimes I do hear candidates and people recount quite personal stories. And what I like to say is like keeping it simple enough that I will understand it in 2 minutes. If you leave me with more questions than answers, then you might A, make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, B, you might end up segueing the conversation, or C, you might just put me off altogether. Now, for anybody who's going to step in and be like, it's right that I can talk about my mental health, I'm not saying that it isn't right to talk about it. I'm just saying, is now the right time to talk about it in a job interview? And make sure that it's something significant as well. Sometimes people will kind of give something that's very small. To be honest, just being a student and having a job and a relationship and friends and all that is quite challenging to overcome. It requires some creative problem solving. Question 8, tell me about a time when you had to resolve a conflict. Good question. Resolving a conflict is something that we've dealt with quite a few times already in the past. Thing to think about is speak to that person alone, identify the source of the conflict, be objective, think about the outcome that you're seeking to achieve. The last point is actually quite important. Very often if there's a conflict or there's a disagreement, and I've seen this in terms of managing teams and companies and just individuals, sometimes people will kind of try and just fight their corner for the sake of being right. This is very dangerous when people's egos get involved and they think my sense of correctness and rightness is important to represent who I am as a human being. That's a really bad way to go about things, and it's going to be quite frustrating for you. Personally, I've really got no problem saying, I'm wrong, I'm sorry, let's move on. A lot of the times for me, I'm just not aware that something has happened. Someone will bring it to my attention, I'll go, oh yeah, I didn't mean to do that at all, I'm really sorry about that. So understanding the end goal, if someone's just disagreeing with you and there's a conflict, you have a conversation and actually their point of view is pretty good, then cool, just say, yeah, it's pretty good. A lot of times what many people suffer from is they can be quite closed-minded and think that only their opinion is correct, but it makes for a very one-dimensional way of viewing the world. So the next couple of questions that we're going to go through are really kind of just short ones, but just ones for you to sort of be aware of that might just crop up and you're like, I don't know. For example, who is the Deutsche Bank CEO? Christian Sewing. I totally didn't know that, right? Tell me about a recent Deutsche Bank news story. So Bloomberg, BBC News, Google News. Try to pick something that's simple. So I have this time and time again. I think I've talked about it somewhere else recently, about just doing one simple thing. Just explain one simple concept. Instead of trying to explain, I don't know, global inflation, just talk about, why petrol prices are going up in London. Try and zoom in and make it as simple as you can. A lot of times people think that complexity is best because it shows them to be really clever. For me, it doesn't, because you're just leaving me feeling confused and I haven't learned anything. If I haven't learned anything, then I just feel like this wasn't a worthwhile interaction. What is Deutsche Bank's share price as of today? It was 11.07 euros. You're welcome. Who are our main competitors? So that's just a couple of questions that you can lay out. So it could be competitors in the UK, competitors in Germany, competitors in terms of particular industries or service lines. And again, that's something that you can learn just by doing a little bit of homework. These things may come to mind really easily. If you're not that way inclined, or you're actually not particularly a super finance person and you're applying to Deutsche Bank, but maybe you don't really know anything about stocks and shares, and those are a couple of questions for you to prepare for. So let's go back to the last couple of questions, which are a bit more competency based again. Question 13, tell me a time when you showed leadership skills. Every big company is looking for people who can demonstrate that they can be leaders, that they can take a group of people, they can take a series of resources and put them together, which as a combination of all their sum parts equals something greater. It's an important thing to think about. It wouldn't be a very good business if you were paying out more salaries than you were taking in revenue. That business would go broke very quickly. So good leaders are able to put together super talented people, pay them money, but then actually generate more money than what they're paying them. And the same for plant and machinery and so on and so forth. So good leadership, what does this mean? Well, communication, conflict resolution, resource allocation and management, pastoral care, resolving differences and problems easily and effectively, being consistent, being resilient, and I think personally, being really hardworking. Certainly my observations of good leaders, and also trying to be a leader myself, is that really, if you're not the hardest working person in the room, then you shouldn't be in that room and you shouldn't be leading those people. We all have on and off days and we all have a different idea and concept about hard work, but I haven't met anybody who is successful and who I admire who doesn't work their absolute socks off. Question 14, what are your strong and weak points? So we've talked about strength and weaknesses before. I would pick one strength, one weakness. For the strength, look at the job description, try and figure out one of the skills that they're looking for and see how that matches up with your strengths and your skills. For your weaknesses, pick something that isn't so bad. It could be, sometimes I have a tendency to rush, or I have good attention to detail, but I can get sucked into it and spend a bit too much time. Just say what you've learned, how you've grown, how you've improved. We all have weaknesses. Half the battle is just knowing what they are. There's nothing worse than dealing with somebody who just completely disregards their weaknesses and they'll just say that it's someone else's fault or you're getting the wrong end of the stick. It's quite frustrating to work with people like that. Question 15, finally, where do you see yourself in 5 years? We've dealt with this one before. Here at Deutsche Bank, forever and ever and ever. Working here in a management role, running a team in a particularly specialized division, working on a particular market. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this extended video about Deutsche Bank as much as we enjoy putting it together for you. Please show us some love, subscribe to the channel, click like, drop a comment down below, even if it's a comment for the YouTube algorithm, and let us know what other companies you'd like us to cover in the next Past the Interview series. Best of luck.